We're here with Christopher Macchio, classically trained opera tenor, star tenor of the New York tenors, and we are now sitting in Bedminster, New Jersey at one of the famous Trump properties. Well, you have a very unique and amazing voice. You and I have been friends for almost 20 years, I'd say.
19 years.
19 years. We go back a very long way. I had the privilege of shooting you with my Sony Handycam back at Stony Brook University.
Yeah.
And now we're filming on a high-performance Sony A7 III. Share with the viewers, how did you come to meet President Trump? I know you have a huge backstory, but that could be filmed for another time. But the moment you met Trump.
Well, the quick version, I met him. Elton John canceled for a New Year's Eve party. And so one of the members at Mar-a-Lago suggested that I could be a replacement. And no one had really heard of me at that point. But that member told then Donald Trump, oh, I've got a kid, up in New York. He's great. So Donald said, bring him down, fly him down. And I performed in the ballroom for New Year's Eve that night. And it went over extremely well, standing ovation. We had almost 1,000 people, celebrities, all kinds of folks. And then Donald Trump said, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, and it was Rod Stewart. And Rod Stewart right then and there asked me to sing for his 70th birthday, which was to take place about 10 days later in Beverly Hills at his home.
Wow.
It was in 2020. When by that time his brother Robert had become one of my biggest fans. And unfortunately Robert passed away in 2020 in
God
August.
bless his soul.
And I was very honored that his widow Anne Marie asked me to perform all of the music for the funeral. I went to Rod's house and everything was fantastic, and then I think I said that I got busy, President got busy. I was actually invited to when he came down the escalator at Trump Tower in 2015, June of 2015.
I remember that text message you sent me.
That was unbelievable. I have first-person video of him making the famous announcement speech where he talked about the Mexicans crossing the border and all that. And right then and there, I knew it was game on. Game on.
You know what's funny? Because in that day, you texted me. You didn't even say anything. You just sent me a picture of the pass.
Oh, right, the VIP.
And I was like,
yeah.
Trump is running? And you're like, yup. And at the moment, at the time.
Because it was kind of, half secret, whatever.
Right.
There was a press announcement, but it wasn't 100% sure what he was going to say at that announcement. So I was privileged to be in attendance for that historic occasion. And then a few years later, as I started to say before, his brother Robert became a really big fan of mine. He is involved in a lot of wonderful charities. He was very philanthropic. And unfortunately, in August of 2020, he passed away. And his widow, Anne Marie, called me up. Before the news had even broken on CNN, she called me up and said, he just passed, and I thought of you. I think it's a sign from God, but I want you to perform all of the music for the funeral. Wow. And originally, it was supposed to be conducted in Manhattan, but de Blasio's COVID policies prohibited that.
Right.
So we moved it to the East Room of the White House. And, the leader of my band for that occasion was John Cain, the keyboardist and songwriter from the group Journey. And so John and I went through all the music, and I had my arranger, PJ Cardinal, come up with some wonderful arrangements. And we had a really solemn but beautiful celebration of the life of Robert Trump. In fact, in the middle of that service, I sang the Lord's Prayer, and at the end of it, President Trump jumped out of his seat and gave me a standing ovation, and
which is not normal for a Catholic
which normally,
ceremony,
you don't usually see that, but he was, I think, really moved by that piece, and everyone else followed his lead on that. And afterwards, as people were shaking my hand and congratulating me on the performance, President Trump called me over, and he said that my voice reminded him of an old friend of his, Luciano Pavarotti. And he asked me directly, who was better, Pavarotti or myself? And of course, I said, Pavarotti's my hero, and he will always be number one. But I really appreciated the comparison. It was very flattering.
And I actually asked you, come here a minute, do you remember this? He sang at Mar-a-Lago, he sang for us on a number of occasions. And I said to him, let me ask you something, Christopher. Pavarotti was a friend of mine, and he had a great voice. But I can't tell the difference, and I'm pretty good with music, but I can't tell the difference between your voice and Pavarotti's voice, and you'll see that in a little minute. You're gonna fully understand it. But I said, just out of curiosity, do you think you're as good as Pavarotti? No, no, no. He was the maestro. He was the greatest of all time. And I love that answer, because even though I can't see the difference, because you'll see, but he is so great, but that's the way you should say it. And I don't know if you believe that. Do you think Pavarotti was the greatest of all time?
The greatest.
Yeah, it's really something. It was beautiful. I never forgot it.
Has anyone ever made a comparison like that with you ever before?
Well, now and then people will draw a parallel because Pavarotti looms large in the field of opera. And I really give the same answer every time, which is that Pavarotti will always be number one as far as I'm concerned. But I'm very, very happy to try my best to follow in his illustrious footsteps. And so I was really flattered to get that kind of compliment from the president. And it was at that time he asked me to perform right after his acceptance speech for the RNC, which was also to take place at the White House 6 days later.
Wow.
So we had, a little bit of time to prepare for that, 6 days. And actually I performed that set twice because the TV people insisted that I do it not after his speech, but rather at 8 o'clock. Unfortunately, nobody was really paying attention at 8 o'clock. All of the news people were talking and anticipating what his speech might consist of. So no one was I didn't really get that much exposure on that. So after I finished, I watched the rest of the speeches from the South Lawn. I was right next to Laura Ingraham and Raymond Arroyo. And it was at that time that the Secret Service came over and said the president would like you to come back into the White House and to perform that 20-minute set again.
Wow.
After the speech, after the fireworks. And so I was already vocally spent. I had nothing left.
Right.
And Christopher came to the White House, and he was incredible. We had him actually on a very special occasion. He played the patio. We call it the patio. It's actually overlooking everything, overlooking the great lawns of the White House. Such a beautiful place.
So I had to marshal whatever resources I had, pull myself together.
Wow.
In fact, John Kane, whose wife was the White House pastor, Paula White, John Kane put his hands on me and prayed, that God would give me the strength to deliver another performance for the nation, this time with more attention on it.
Right.
And I started to sing, and the whole first family turned around and stood single file at attention and just looked up at the balcony, or the patio as they call it. And I sang for 15, 20 minutes with the first family, just looking up and appreciating what it was that I was delivering to them and to the country at large. And that was one of the greatest honors of my life, that I would be given that opportunity, and that the first family would, arrange for me to be featured in that moment, in that way. It was really just something that I'm extremely grateful for.
It's just so remarkable how there's such a stark contrast in the selection of performing arts done by President Trump versus what's being shown now. I just find it it kind of speaks for itself. We don't need to go there. But
yeah, there's a big difference.
Huge difference.
Between the taste. If you look at the playlist of President Trump on his iPad versus the kind of music that you might hear at some other political venues on the other side of the equation, like you said, it's
diametrically
really,
opposite tastes and
it's
decorating.
really quite the contrast, I think. And it shows that, among other things, that President Trump is and always has been a person of great taste,
right,
and great judgment,
right,
and he celebrates people doing things well.
Right. And it's interesting how he took notice and provided an opportunity for someone like you, who he had no idea, but someone in his inner circle vouched for you, and then
Right.
you delivered. So it's a testament to his taste and the fact that no one before that really paid attention to your greatness, which I always knew that you were always a one of a kind. You know, I mean, when I first heard you sing back in college, I knew there was something special about you. And I was always going to be like, listen, you are something very special. There really is a moment where you tune the world out and you are in in his presence when it comes out through you. And I just think I'm leaning into my
his mean by his you mean the Lord.
Of course.
It's always been my belief that all of the gifts that each of us have been endowed with ultimately derive from our Creator, and
Jesus.
we're really nothing more than stewards of those gifts, and we do have the obligation to share those gifts for the betterment of our fellow citizens, our fellow man.
Absolutely.
And you see that reflected in the decisions that President Trump has made. Here he is, living a wonderful life, a life that few could even imagine. And he, over a long period of time, was discerning that there were serious problems, serious issues that our country was facing, systemic issues. And finally, in 2015, he had seen enough, and he knew that the time was right for him to step in. And as one of the few people who really had what it takes to withstand the tremendous resistance and retaliation that the system exacts upon anyone who tries to go against the grain and to recalibrate the system for the betterment of the citizens rather than a select few.
Right.
And he knew it, he saw it, and he knew that this country really needed to have somebody make it great again. And that's precisely what he did for those 4 years. And that's precisely what I believe he'll do when he's reelected on November 5th for the next 4 years.
God willing, hopefully he gets it. It's interesting how his assassination attempt, as horrific as it was, grazed his ear and injured his ear. And yet, during the RNC, you were there to help heal his ear, and his love for music can help.
Absolutely.
Because I think 2 events later, he ended up removing the bandage. So, anyway, I don't want to keep you. I understand you have a performance. I don't want to hoarse your voice more than I did, but thank you so much for the time, Christopher.
Thank you so much. And, I'm looking forward to great things ahead for myself, for you, and even more so for our country.
For our country, absolutely. Thank you, Christopher. God bless President Trump. Thank you, Bedminster. Appreciate the hospitality for the First Family, the Trump Organization, the family. Thank you so much.
Thank you.